Well, good morning, everybody. Hope you are well. Here we are at Graham's seminar. Just waiting for the time to start. We're due to kick off sometime around 11:30, so I've been told. And obviously, I'm starting the live stream a little bit earlier just to allow everyone a chance to get in and get comfortable and ready for the proceedings. So, about 10 minutes yet, and we should get going. Graham's in here, he's just out of sight, and there's a few people still arriving, so a little bit of commotion coming through at the moment. Have to apologise a little bit for the sunlight at the right hand side.
Just to let everyone know, so try as much as you possible everyone coming in to use the bar and the facilities, etc. Obviously their price list is up there. We did put a little bit of money behind the bar for the people who helped us out because we was cancelled yesterday at late notice. But again, that money's just run out, so you need to pay, but try and use it as much as you can. If they do pints of Guinness, I don't want them after. That's it.
There you go, folks. You heard from Graham. Can you let me know that the sound's okay for everybody? Graham's actually got a PA system. There he is. He's got a PA system in use this time. Instead of last time when we did this, the sound was rather awful. 5 for 5, wonderful. Thank you for letting me know. If anyone's just tuning in, if you can subscribe to the channel and share this everywhere with your mates, that'd be very much appreciated. That way we get this out to as many people as possible. That would be wonderful. As I say, we'll be coming through very shortly. Robin, you might get a little bit of disturbance at the moment. I'm on a mic myself, but we've still got people arriving at the moment, and there's a little bit of background music going on. So hopefully, once everything's tickety-boo, it'll be fine.
There are issues with this where they've still got big rent. Somewhere in the region of 70,000 because they lost another place. So they've still got immigration, which is what I'm
doing. There we go. We've got nearly 50 people in already, and we haven't even started yet. So this will be a good one. What's everybody been up to this morning? Did you get lies in? Did you have a decent bit of brekkie? What's happening? Sharing definitely is caring, Juicy Lucy, absolutely. Sunday, torrential rain in St Helens. I'll tell you what, I drove up from Margate this morning and it was absolutely tipping it down with rain. It really was tipping it down hard, so made an interesting drive. It's great that this venue where we are at the moment has offered to stand in at last minute. Really wonderful. Hello, Lucinda. Good to see you. Yeah, Graham was off stage just to one side, and I'm on one of my Rode portable mics. And as I say, there's a little bit of noise going on in the background at the moment, so there'll be a little bit of disturbance, a little bit muffled. But if you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook, if you're on anything of that nature, please give me a share. Be very much appreciated. And we'll try and get this out to as many people as possible. Apparently the original venue that we had that was organised could hold something like 200 people, and with a last minute cancellation, you can see the live I did last night, They really tried to throw a spanner in the works at last minute. There's a couple of people I was expecting to turn up here, which would have been good, and I've been told they're not coming. A bit disappointing, but you know, each to their own decisions. That's all we can do. But hopefully it'll be a good few hours, and we'll see what happens. So all good. Anyway, don't forget to hit the like button, folks, and get this shared. I mean, this stream really, where I did the thing last night, I got a lot of people saying that they were going to tune into this so they could see what Graham had to say, and that was really good, really something. So hopefully people will get a lot out of this. There's another YouTube influencer that's going to be here as well at some point, an online influencer, so that's all good. And the place is actually filling up with people quite nicely, you know, so hopefully get a bit of attention on this and what's going on. And the more we do it, the more things spread around, you know, so much the better. It's all pretty good. But anyway, folks, just to say, this is Andy the Cabby at the venue where we are waiting for Graham's English seminar to start, which hopefully will be time now. I got the thing going a little bit early just to get people in the room, get it going, get people comfortable, so you can see what's going on. The advertised time to start is about 11:30, so we're coming up to that, and when people are settled, we've still actually got people arriving, which is good. Should be good any time. I sound great like a football commentator. I'm actually sat here with a Rode microphone talking into that, so not too bad. The only thing I'm worried about where I'm sitting is I've got 4 seats in front of me, so I hope I don't get anyone. I've noticed this sort of Gen X, which is away. Absolutely, we need to get the younger people in on this. We need to get younger people realising what's going on, because at the end of the day, when we're long gone, it's them that are going to be left with this world. You know, it's really very simple. Really very simple. You can hear all the folks coming in. It really is good. Really is good. You can see in the middle there, muted across the George Cross. And that's the way it feels sometimes, when you try and educate people as to what's going on. Okay, we've got 69 people watching so far, just jumped up to 71, and 36 likes. Could we try and get that up a little bit more? That would be good, thank you. Good morning, England, Susan says. Absolutely. Yeah, the owner of the premises wanted me to try and keep the focus on Graham and the chair and what's going on and everything. So should all work out just fine.
That's going to be, we're going to be in the way of your film.
Where did you want to sit?
I don't mind, I was just looking for a chair. I can sit down the front.
Yeah.
Cabby!
That's me. All right.
I see your cab outside. Black one to me. My brother's in black cab driving over 20 years.
20 years, sir.
Tommy Bragg.
I think I'm going to have to adjust my camera.
Sorry, mate. Do you want me to go somewhere else? I'll sit over there.
Yeah, we might have to relocate here, I think. That's all right. Do you mind if I set this up across here?
It's not good over there. It's too far.
Yeah, it's got people sat there. So
Maybe I need to get out of the way.
You'll be okay.
I saw myself in the other one. I didn't quite get it. It was 2 hours long, so I didn't quite get to the question. And my when I said
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
got
better.
so many ideas. It's kind of a group of people to
Get it sorted out.
yeah.
Yeah, that's better there
Am
actually.
I not in it?
No, you're not.
Oh,
Yeah, I can't see the Act of Settlement. I've got from the Bill of Rights that way, so that's all right. I'm just going to grab
and
this
you
stuff.
got to the corner.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's quite a small little record, isn't it?
From the Magna Carta all the way to the Bill of Rights. So it's perfect. Well, there you go, folks. Just found a new home for the camera. When I set up,
You haven't got any in the audience. Take one. You always take that.
Okay, everyone, we have just moved to the front and slightly better place. The only problem is that's filming. I think we'll be going soon, folks. If I can have another sound check again, that'd be good. Can everybody hear me okay?
Is it better using the mic? And then I'll switch to this.
All 5x5, that's good. Thank you, everybody. So we got 100 people in already, and not quite started, so that's good. So if you can all make sure you hit the like button, share this with your friends, and get the word of the English around as much as possible.
One of these should be.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Graham's just sorting his sound out.
Everyone on the back. hear me okay?
Yes!
So when I start singing, I did it my way, you can all clap, don't you?
We should be starting any time soon.
Right, Neil, get me ready.
I don't know if he needs it, chair. I'm kind of hogging 2-3 chairs.
That's all right.
Do you need a chair?
So the event is scheduled normally for 11:30. Because we normally say get here early because it starts at 12. So because of the change of venue, which I'm going to be talking about when I open this up, we'll probably be starting in about 10 minutes. And you may get people come in from the back, etc. But hopefully everything will go right and we'll just crack on from there. Can I ask the management if there's any way of turning the heating down in the front? Yeah, because I'm already starting to sweat. I can feel hot air. Huh? I don't want to be doing a strict thing, I just want to throw it.
You can send your cat round, going. Open the window.
There you go, you heard 10 minutes. And on the road, just a few final checks and that sort of thing. To see so many in already, just over 100 people, 112. You make sure again, thumbs up, share this around everybody, and let's get this educational content out there, which is exactly what it is. The English Constitution Society.
The old life of
It'll be in every school.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The other quick one is, at the front, I will be going through this, but all of these banners were originally designed as vinyl for stand in the pubs, because we used to go all around the country and stand in the pubs, and obviously it was outside, it could be raining. But all of these are prints straight off of legislation.co.uk, which is a government website, right? This is all current law. Nothing that I'm talking about is not law. Everything is law, including the Magna Carta of 1297, which I'll be talking about. There's others that are not here. The only reason they're not here is because our statutes go all the way around that room that are constitutional, all the way around here, and all the way down there. And venues are not big enough for our constitutional statutes. But don't forget, it hasn't started. I'll just give you
That's all right. At least that one don't be
indication
charged
of
now,
what's
does
going
it?
on.
Can't really see.
These books at the front, you're more than welcome to take pictures of the front. Try not to pick them up and walk off, for the simple reason, some of these are literally hundreds of years old. There's one there's about 200 years old, and I've got older ones
There we go.
up there as well. The older books are the best books.
No, that's fine.
Because there is no...
Yeah, that's fine. I'll pick up over if there's anything happens to you.
I just tell the law the way it is, and that's the way it should be. There's none of this Marxist nonsense involved, right? But I will be going through some other bits. I will try. So all I'm doing, we haven't started.
That done well, everybody.
I may
Try and have a chat with her later.
pick it on if I'm going to read out something from one of the law books. But these presentations are not try. There is nothing scripted. All I do is speak through it and tell you how we come about the law, why we did, etc. But part of it is, when I read from the actual law books, it tells you, just to make sure everyone's aware of this, that fascism and communism, right, are both unlawful in England. And fascists and communists must be purged. When you understand it says that in the law books, you then need to ask the question why there are Fabians running the cabinet, meaning Keir Starmer, who's an executive member of the Fabian Society, which is a Marxist communist group. Sam Khan is an executive member of the Fabian Society. And the last time that happened was Tony Blair. You can all cheer, or whatever you want to do. We're completely neutral, right? But the last time there was a Fabian cabinet, we went to war on a lie with Iraq, right? But everyone needs to understand this is completely non-political, right? This is the English Constitution Society, and we are about England and the English Constitution and the laws and how they come about. That's it, right? We haven't started yet, but there's still people coming in. Don't forget there's been a change of venue. But if anyone wants to take photographs of the book, understand where they can go and get the actual statutes, you can get them online, or you can go and buy one of them books. You only need, if you're concentrating on the Constitution, you only need 2 or 3 books. If you really want to go into history, that's when you have to start hunting them, right? Which is what I do. That's it. So in a couple of minutes we'll start it, or 5 minutes we'll start it.
So let's look at that. Karen, there, you're right, darling. Are we very
The other thing is, just to say, I often get gifts at these events. Sometimes it's English single malt whiskey, and sometimes it's a little brass statue. So, considering my online name is Daddy Dragon, which I will be talking about shortly as well, I'll be showing that, and I've just got, I'm going to have a working to the front of the car, you know, like a Jaguar, but it's going to be
There you go, folks. A little introduction from Graham there. We'll be starting properly in about 5 minutes. Who we got in the house? 117 watching. Just jumped to 120. 73 likes. If we can try and bump that up a little bit, that all helps. And obviously share this around all your social media. There's a couple of us here, which are content creators. I've got another selfie stick and mobile phone been set up in front of my one. You can probably hear the voice of Emma Dunwell when she come over, and maybe have a little chat with her a bit later on. Anyway, enjoy the show, folks, and we will be starting very soon. What I'll probably do as well is upload this as a separate video, probably tomorrow at some point, so it has just the just straight from the start in it, and you haven't got the waiting around right at the beginning. But any time now, the show will be on the road. Can everybody still hear everything okay as well? If you can give me a sound check, that would be great. Yeah, there is a lot of background noise. There is people still arriving, and a lot of hustle and bustle going on, but when it starts it will be quiet, and you'll be able to hear everything quite nicely. So there we go. Yeah, I slightly misunderstood things because it said 11:30 start, but it was basically 11:30 arrival for a 12 o'clock start. But I thought if I get it switched on for 20 past, it will give everyone a chance to get in, and obviously we can get rocking and rolling. There is one of the things slightly off where you've got muted. You've got the Bill of Rights just to the right-hand side there. You've actually got the Act of Settlement to the right of that, but that's slightly off screen. Yeah, thanks Juicy and Lucy. If everyone can hit the like button, share this with your friends, and just as important, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And the show will be on the road very shortly.
Sit down. We're going to take a picture.
Where's Gabby from? Gabby. Is that a spare seat? Two spare seats at the front there. Is that a spare one? There's one spare seat there. There's different seats in different places. You can even sit on these ones. I've just put the code there, but you see how close it gets. But Gary, and who else is there? Someone else. When we finish this, we need to take this down so I can show everyone.
I hope
We are about
No,
to start.
it's not at all, don't worry.
You've got to make sure you don't hit that camera. Just make sure you come forward off the camera. Because the camera's on legs. Where else is we?
To be fair, the speaker's right there.
No, but it's just not like that at the back.
No, it's quite
Are we
clear.
getting there? Are we ready? And it's lucky I'm driving.
Today we are covering the seminar. You can connect to that, by the way, if you like.
What is it?
Portable Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I think we're going to be starting about now.
You're nearly ready. I'll ask the cameraman if they're ready. Give me a thumbs up. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Andy, Gabby, Cabby, thumbs up. Anyone else there? Thumbs up. Right, we are ready to start. Take your seats. And then I'll explain some issues that we've had. So first of all, if you don't know who I am, my name is Graham Moore, otherwise known as Daddy Dragon, and I am going to show my little thingy. So I've just been given that, right? That gives me immense pleasure because people don't realise that the Witham was the original flag of England. It's based on, this is not a Witham, but it's similar. And why I got the name Daddy Dragon was literally because all I ever spoke about was England and the Constitution and our common law rights and the history of the common law and the history of the Constitution and why it protects us. So people then referred to me and sent me books, and inside it said, to Father Dragon, right? And then it got cut down to Daddy Dragon, as you do, and then it got cut down and Americanised into DD. So you'll hear lots of different references to me today. The major point to point out today is before we continue, you will see an English flag and the hashtag muted. That's very appropriate for today. I'm not going to say where we are, but this place has stepped in literally with hours notice and hosted this event. You'll all be aware that I've actually come up from Devon, where I now reside, to do this event. And it is an English constitutional seminar where I explain to people our laws, where they come from, explain how old England is, etc., and just talk people through it. Now the event last night, once we put up the constitutional, all these frames, the constitutional laws, all the books set out exactly as you can see it now, we then left the hall, went back to where I was staying, there was a phone call, and the council hall cancelled without a notice. We said why, and they said we don't like your content. The content is the English Constitution and England and our rights. Just to make sure everyone is clear on this, that's against the Equality Act. It is discrimination. Our solicitors have already contacted me and said we are suing them. Right? I want to make sure I finish this. In Britain, 40 years ago, you could put a sign on a pub door, on a hotel door, on a guest house, and say, no blacks, no Irish, and no travellers. Now, the sign on that door is no English, right? And the only people that can turn that around is you, right? Again, I'm going to this before I start. There is the Constitution and the common law, and nowhere under the English Constitution, written or by convention, does it mention race, right? The English, via a certain case which was Stewart versus Somerset, 1772, a white working class non-lawyer called Granville Sharp stopped slavery, right? It wasn't the British. Wilberforce was on our side, right? But it took him 20 consecutive years to get the Abolition Act through a British Parliament. So every year he put it through, and every year the British Parliament rejected it because they wanted to carry on. But we, as the English and English judges, made it unlawful. And then therefore it was unlawful, it was therefore unprofitable. And that's what, they're not teaching you that in school anymore. They've reversed the tables, and the British, through divide and rule, which is all they've ever done all around the world, basically get the Scots and the English at it against each other. I've got no issues with the Scots, no issues with the Welsh, no issues with the Irish and the Northern Irish, and certainly no issues with Cornwall, right? We believe in self-determination. Just to make sure you're all clear, that is a human right, global human right, UN Convention on Human Rights, Declaration, self-determination, right? So we'll be talking about some of that, but not majorly, but everyone will understand what it is that we're about, okay? So, again, muted, cancelled by the other place. Don't forget, this is the English Constitution Society. We are non-political, absolutely non-racist. What we do is explain to people what the law is, right? And then how you claim your rights, because you must claim your rights. If you don't claim them, you've lost them. And the system itself is geared that way. Can I have someone just give me a hand taking the left-hand side of the red one on that off? So if you take the red one off, just clip it off. And I'll clip that one off. And you just wait that one over. Just if you can roll that up and just put it on the side there, and I'll go from there. Right, so what we're going to do now, I will start to talk through. Hopefully you can all hear me and you're not getting too much of a buzz from me being too close to the mic. Good, bad or ugly? I'll take it it's all right. Right, okay. So, I said earlier, if I was to put our constitutional statutes all around this place, it'd take up both sides and the back. The most important ones are here. There are other ones. There is one before, so that you've got the Magna Carta of 1215, which is a charter. Some people say that that's the original law. They're actually wrong to say it's the original law. It's not the original law. There was a charter before that, which was, let me think when it was. I think it was in 1690. Not 1690, 1190. So you had something before the Magna Carta, and that was called the Charter of Liberties. And the king started messing about and not giving us them rights. The barons rose up again, and we ended up with the Great Charter. Again, it was written in Latin. Some people have said that the Pope annulled it. The Pope couldn't annul it. Under English law and the traditions of England and English law, it was by deed of battle. In other words, there's some people who say that King John had a knife to his throat or a sword to his throat. He sealed the Magna Carta, he didn't sign it, at Runnymede. But the point I'm trying to make to you is, the Pope cannot annul it, because we have always had something in England called deed of battle. I could go into details with that. It's where eventually the defamation laws come from. Everyone know about, literally 200 years ago, if someone insulted you, you'd slap them around the face and say, I'll see you at dawn on Sunday, and you walk out in the green, they take 10 paces further and shoot each other. That's deed of battle, right? So it's part of the deed of battle, and they abolished it by bringing in defamation laws. So to stop semi-intelligent rich people shooting each other over honour or pride, they brought in and they said it is much better to ruin a man financially than it is to shoot him. In other words, for them it was a fate worse than death, to be made skint by your enemy, right? So they brought that in. So that's all part of the deed of battle going all the way back, and why you cannot annul, you could not annul the original Magna Carta. And in fact, if you go back and look at Hansard, there is a number of debates in Parliament where politicians who actually understand the law made reference to that you cannot make a law that goes against the Magna Carta, right? And again, that's in Hansard. So the Magna Carta was really important in various ways. What we've left up on there is chapter 9. No free man shall be taken or imprisoned or be deceased of his freehold or liberties or free customs, or be outlawed or exiled or any otherwise destroyed, nor will we not pass upon him nor condemn him, but by lawful judgment of his peers, right, which means a jury. But the jury of that time was not the jury of today, just to let you know, right? Then people who say we want to go back to the juries of 1215, you definitely don't want to get involved with that, right? And the reason why they brought in a new form of jury then, and it wasn't the form of jury we got now, is because prior to that, it was by ordeal, right? What does that mean? Well, if someone thought you was guilty of something, this is the way they proved it. They take your hand or arm and stick it in a vat of boiling oil, and if it went septic and you died, you was guilty, right? You was guilty. And then if you recovered after months and months and months, you was innocent. Bit like the ducking ponds for witches, you know. I'm sure my ex-wife is in one somewhere. Right. nor will we the law of the land. We will sell to no man, we will not deny or defer to any man either justice or right. We will not deny, which is why they cannot not allow you to have a court case, etc., etc. It must be fair, or defer, right? So when you start seeing court cases that are coming up to, one guy I know was 13 years before he got justice on a single, by the way, that was the police that smashed his head in, and it took 13 years for him to get compensation, right? So just think about that, and then think about what the law says, and you all understand. And when I say this guy's now got brain damage, he literally got his head caved in, and they never ever offered up the police constable that did it to him, right? So before I go further into the rest of it, I just want to cover that off before we do anything else. There will be a questions and answers once we've got into this for about 2 hours. 15-minute break. The toilets are that way. The back part of there is a fire exit. So all you've got to do if there's anything goes wrong, you just go all the way through out that door. This is important because people, and namely government, universities, colleges, the media, right? The mainstream media, and even some alternative media, tell us we haven't got a constitution, right? So the first thing to say to you is, this is England. We, as a nation, are 1100 years old. If we don't have a constitution, why do we have a constitutional monarchy? Why do we have courts? And why do we have a parliament? Because we have a constitution. That is what puts them 3 elements of state in place. Those that people then, normally on the extreme left I may add, then say to me, without answering that, but we haven't got a written constitution. Oh right. So what's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? Bill of Rights. Ooh. You know, they keep talking about the British Bill of Rights. Why do we need one? We've got the English Bill of Rights. The claim of right for Scotland. We don't need a Bill of Rights. We've got one. They don't like it. Right? I'm going to get to that as we talk through. And then you've got a really important one, was the Act of Settlement, which is an extension of that one, the English Bill of Rights. And I'll be reading through the important parts. This is not a dry seminar on law, right? What I do is tell you the important parts to empower you to understand that you are constitutionally protected from the government and from basically any state function, and that includes the police, right? Who are not who they used to be, right? And I can tell you the reason why and when it changed. But they say we don't have a written constitution. So what I do then is pick up this book, which is the Halsbury's Statutes. By the way, Halsbury's Statutes and Halsbury's Laws of England. Halsbury's Laws of England is common law, and that's the statutory law. I hold up these books and I say, so why is it then that Halsbury's Statutes, which is in every law court in the country, volume number 10, 4th edition, constitutional law, which is probably 2.5, maybe 2.5 inches thick, with all of those constitutional statutes in there, right? So, if we don't have a written constitution, why is there a book that says Halsbury Statutes, 4th edition, volume number 10, constitutional law, and you can tell any judge in this country and any magistrate in this country, you can walk in there and take that with you and says that is against my constitutional rights. I'll go more detail about that later. Then you have another book, which is Halsbury's Laws of England, 4th edition, volume number 8, conflicts of laws, which I'm going to get to, and constitutional law. So the common law constitution, right? So again, those people say we haven't got a written constitution. You show them these books, you show them this, and you say, well, what's that then? And by the way, they still then go on to the next phase without arguing back and saying, I accept that, we've got a constitution. Who gave America their constitution? England, not the British. The British attacked them. In 1776. Oh, by the way, anyone heard of Paul Revere? The guy who rode and said, the British are coming, the British are coming. Everyone remember that? From history? We should do. There was another guy that rode with him. And I'm guilty of forgetting his name, right? But everyone's forgotten his name. And he rode in the direction saying, the British are coming, the British are coming. What colour was it? Black. Right, erased from history. Here's the kicker. What was his job? He was a judge. A black judge in 1776 in the United States of America. Right? And they never tell you that. They never teach you that at school. They've erased him from history. Right? And they've done the same thing with the English. It's what they intended all along. So again, they say, we haven't got a codified constitution. So I then say, well, what's the Bill of Rights? The Bill of Rights, Article 1 to 13, is codified. And we can go through the codification. I will partly go through it when I get to this. This was then extended, so what I'm going to do at the moment is just show you something briefly. The Bill of Rights of 1688 come from the Glorious Revolution. Does everyone understand? There's a lot of talk at the moment about a civil war. Anyone heard of that? Right. Right, so I'm going to make sure everyone's aware of this. Civil wars, not very nice. They're the worst type of war, right? And there's a lot of military that are with us, including special forces. They have done this type of thing to other countries on behalf of the British regime and British establishment. They know what's going on, right? You don't want a civil war. And the reason you don't is because they need one, and the reason they need one is you cannot rewrite the Constitution unless there's been civil unrest and they bring a convention parliament. That comes from the convention parliament. Does everyone know what a convention parliament is? There was no king. We was known as the kingdom without a king, and it was the Glorious Revolution because the king threw the English shield into the River Thames and rode off. They called him in Ramsgate, by the way. Sent a message back, and they got a message back from Ramsgate, I don't know. They said, do you want us to keep him? Do you want him back? And they didn't want to cut his head off. So they said, no, let him go. And he went over to France. But this particular book is the Declaration of Rights, 1689, and it tells you the history. There's another one that gives you the full history. Them two books on their own are worth about, one of them's worth 1,500 quid to get the original, right? They don't want you knowing what the history is, the real history of this. So getting back to a convention parliament is the highest form of parliament. So you've got two things. You've got a convention parliament, and then you've got something else called an ordinary parliament. The same thing exists in laws. You've got a constitutional statute, which cannot be changed, and then you've got something else called an ordinary statute, which Parliament can make law and change, but they're not allowed. It is a limited government, a limited Parliament, and a limited crown. That is what the Glorious Revolution created. But they're trying to erase that part from your memory completely. They used to teach you prior to the early 1970s. Anyone know what the problem was with the early 1970s? IRA. There's a lot of issues with the IRA. I can touch on that if you want. Right? was with the European Union, or what they called it then was the Common Market, or the EEC, right? That statute has what's known as a supremacy clause. Still law in this country that no one can have control over the English. No external prince, pontificate, pope, anyone can have any control over the English. The only people that can govern the English are the English, right? That supremacy clause is still there. That's why they don't want you to know that the English Bill of Rights exists. It's where America, everyone heard of the Second Amendment, right? That's where America got it from, the English. The Bill of Rights, the English Bill of Rights. There's a case called Kerr in America where they went through a historical record and said our Second Amendment comes from England. It's our seventh Amendment, right? Or our seventh. They're all in singular, by the way. So that means all of the rights are yours and can never be taken away, the God-given rights, or you can use them on their own, right? So everyone then but COVID and all that nonsense. They're not allowed to create laws. And so it's called a pretended law. Well, anything that you say is a law and it's been passed through the non-procedure of Parliament, which is a lot of the Coronavirus Act was, you're not allowed to do that, right? And it's us who started writing to the Daily Mail, to the schools. I don't know if anyone knows, but we actually wrote a common law, lawful letter to all the schools that were jabbing kids. We issued them to the headmaster, the head of the School of Governors, and the form tutor. Basically said you're personally responsible for any of their children that are jabbed in your school. Right? You're personally responsible. The schools then sent the letter to the government. 3 days later, they cancelled the whole programme. Right? So again, if you think you're not having the knowledge to empower yourself, that's the difference you can make if you know what the law is. And every part of that law was bang on, right? And they went, well, hang on a minute, we're not doing this. And they stopped it. The important part of this, I'm only going to briefly run on this and then I'll run through it. An act declaring the rights and liberties of the subject and settling the succession of the crown. Whereas the Lord Spiritual and Temporal and Commons assembled at Westminster lawfully, fully and freely representing all estates of the people. The estates of the people are 3 different elements. You've got the Lords, the Commons, and then you've got the Crown in Parliament. The Crown in Parliament is represented by ministers, right? They're actually ministers of the Crown. How many of you know that under English law, let me ask you a different question. How many people think that you've got to be a politician and the leader of a political party to be Prime Minister? How many of you think that? Right? You don't. What the law says is that the Crown picks the minister, but the fact that they're offering him and they found a way of producing their own person that they want to put forward, the Crown's just accepted that. But he doesn't have to do that. In fact, if you go back to, I think it was the early 1950s, if you became a minister, so you was given a portfolio, you had to resign as an MP. You couldn't be an MP and a minister at the same time. Right? It's actually technically unlawful to do what they're doing. There is a limit on how many ministers are allowed to be in Parliament. It was 25, it may have gone up to 60, I can't remember the exact figure now, but there's somewhere in the region of 160 to 180 ministers, which is completely unlawful. But people like you don't know that. You're not told that. You can actually challenge that and take it to the High Court and say that's what the Constitution says. They're not supposed to have that amount of ministers, because it means the Crown is taking over Parliament, right? And it's not allowed. So again, freely representing the states, February in the year of our Lord 1688, present unto their majesties, then called are known by the name and style of William and Mary, Princess and Prince of Orange, being present in their proper persons, a certain declaration, which was the Declaration of Rights. Just to make sure everyone's aware of this, there's two separate documents of the Glorious Revolution. Actually, there's three. There's Declaration of Reasons, which told us why they come over here, and they was invited. It was not an invasion. Then there's the Declaration of Rights. There's 27 heads of terms, and it's called private law. It's a private contract between the Crown and you. So you hear some of these people saying, I don't contract with you, right, and all that. If they actually understood the common law and the law of contract, they will understand that the Declaration of Rights is crucially important, and you can say there's 27 heads of terms of the contract that put you in place as the king of this country, and you swore an oath to it. Therefore, you have to abide by that. If you don't, you have perjured your oath. Has King Charles perjured his oath? Yeah, he has. Right. Technically, he's abdicated. It was a glorious revolution that resolved that, because there was a big issue whether he had absconded, because the Commons were saying he's absconded, and the Lords, which are the peers of the Crown, were saying he's abdicated, right? So the Commons said, we don't care what name you put to it, right? He's not here, and he's run off, right? So he's left us. We want that information. So they said, right, well, we'll just say he's abdicated. What they made clear, Lord John Somers, who was the framer of the English Bill of Rights, and who became the next man who became Lord Chief Justice, was John Holt, which we'll get to. They were the framers of the English Bill of Rights. Now, most people have heard of George Washington. Right, he was one of the framers of the English Bill of Rights. Has anyone heard of Lord John Somers? Has anyone ever heard of Lord Chief Justice, as a matter of stuff, John Holt? Right, so once you understand you've done a law degree, right, and a good law degree, because it's mostly self-educated, is the best way to do it, right? So again, once you understand all that, don't forget this is a fly-through, just to make sure everyone's aware. My personal opinion is you need to do a 2-year foundational law degree on the Constitution of England before you even start on a law degree, right? That means solicitors and barristers. They've stopped teaching this to barristers and solicitors in the early 1970s when they stopped teaching our kids it as well, right? And they did that because we went into the European Union, like I've already said. Because they didn't want you to know that that had a supremacy clause. And therefore what the Parliament was actually doing was subverting the English Constitution. The other words for subversion of the Constitution is treason, right? It's a hanging offence. So again, when you look at that, the heads of the Declaration of Lords and Commons recited, whereas the late King James II, by the assistance of diverse evil councillors, judges, right? We're not talking about the local council here, we're talking about the Privy Council, which are basically any legal professional that takes silk and then can become, if they're given a knighthood, part of the Privy Council, which advise the King. Councillors, judges and ministers employed by him did endeavour to subvert and extirpate the Protestant religion and the laws and liberties of this kingdom, right? And then it goes into further detail, and then it starts to telling you what they can do. There were 13 wrongs and 13 rights, but that is a codified constitution, right? It's only part of it, and I'll get back to one of the books in a couple. And then you've got the extension, right? So I'm going to read out because it's really important. Name of the law is important. So that's called the short title. Short title Bill of Rights. Short title Act of Settlement. It's telling you what it's doing. And then you've got something called the preamble. The preamble, the long title, and then the preamble. But that is an act for the further limitation of the Crown and better securing the rights, This is why it's important. Better securing the rights and liberties of the subject. That was done on the area, and then they had to cement it, and that's what they did. That's why they cannot take these rights off you. No one can, right? So, and again, you're the one who's protected by it. And then it goes into detail. Without me going through all of that, that's crucially important. At chapter 4, it says that the laws of England are the birthright of the people thereof. Two crucial things. The laws of England are the birthright of the people thereof. What does birthright mean? They are your air rights. What that is basically a document that in law we would call it a trust deed, right? There are elements to this that are absolutely bang on. So there are three elements of trust that you need. One is you need trustees. The trustees for this are the Commons, which is us, because they're our representatives, right? They hold our sovereignty, we lend it to them, right? Then you have the Crown in Parliament, which is the other trustee. Then you have the Lords, which is the other trustee. They're the three realms of the state that are the trustees of this, right? That's what the Glorious Revolution was really about. The next thing you need are beneficiaries. Who are the beneficiaries? You are. You're the beneficiaries, and the heir rights, so your children, grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, no one can take it. That's what's under attack at the moment, right? Which I'm going to get into. But then you need something crucial, which is benefit. If you read through this document, it actually enshrines the laws of the realm of England forever, right? And that's what that is actually securing. That all of the laws of realm, so it goes all the way back, it goes back to Anglo-Saxon times. And if anyone don't know anything about the Anglo-Saxons, apart from being two Germanic tribes, they had some of the best laws I've ever read. I've read like Tribes of Britain, and it shows you them, right? And Anglo-Saxon mums were highly respected. They were the educators of the children. And because they couldn't read or write, they rhymed. You remember doing the times tables when you was a kid and you had to sit there going, take, until it was rock solid in your mind, right? Well, they used to do the Anglo-Saxons used to rhyme the laws of England to the kids. So everyone knew the law of the land off by heart, right? Here's the kicker. If you hurt an Anglo-Saxon woman's children, I mean seriously or whatever, if you was what they now call a paedophile, right, and you hurt her kids, she had the right to kill you, and no one prosecuted her. So I thought I'm half like, you know, saying they didn't have really bad laws, and I quite like them laws, right? And the only people who like them laws are people like us, right? Everyone else seems not to like it. So again, going all the way back, the statutes, what they're about. So people are saying to me, where can I get this information? Well, there's another great facility called the Hamlin Lectures, Hamlin Trust. Right now, Cambridge University tried to take these offline, and our group contacted the trustees and said that the database of these lectures, and I'll explain the lectures in a couple of minutes, the database of these lectures had been taken down. The trustees said, thank you for telling us, right? They then got involved and said, part of the trust's obligations is this free information is to the public from our top laws, explaining the laws in simple terms. I don't mean you're simple. In other words, it's not dry. They give you everyday examples of what they can and can't do. From the top lords in the country are in these lectures. So all you've got to do to become an expert in law and understand your rights is to read that. The first one was a guy, anyone heard of Lord Denning? Right. Freedom under the Law, 1949 is the first lecture, right? And it's one of the best lectures you'll ever read, right? Everyone I know who knows Lord Denning, and by the way, I also know his clerk, because his clerk used to email me and say, Tom would have loved you. Because Tom Denning was a working class judge. The establishment hated him, right? And the reason they did, because he openly said judges should be mischievous, right? He liked having a go at the government, and he liked having a go at Parliament, and he'd done so many things in our favour. Lots and lots of cases. He used the Bill of Rights often and stopped them and said you can't do it. Say recent 1975, there was a case in New Zealand where the government taxed someone, and they shouldn't have done. They taxed a whole group of people, and one man in New Zealand stood up and said you can't do that. And the bloke said, the minister said, why is that? They said it's against the Bill of Rights. They took it straight to the High Court, and what did the High Court judge say? They said the gentleman is completely right. This is where I get to, claiming your rights. And the judge said, it goes against Article 1 of the English Bill of Rights. The English Bill of Rights is in full force. You cannot do that. It embarrassed the government. They had to retract everything they said, but the guy won. And it was a single man standing up against the whole government of New Zealand that stood up for everyone. It's called public interest, and stood up. So don't forget, you've got Declaration of Rights, which is private law or contract law, and then you've got public law, which is what that is. What does public law mean? In simple terms, it means it is a criminal injunction against the government, right? Again, if I go back to this book, this is simple stuff. It sounds complicated, it's not. That book and that one there in particular tells you there's something which is an indictable, still the law in this country, which is called contempt of sovereign and contempt of statute. They are the laws that protect you against the government going against your rights from there and your rights from there, right? I'm going to get to another bit in a minute. People, and in fact I'll cover it briefly now. Access Settlement 1700, why is it so important? Because chapter 3, I think it was, stated that you could not be a member of Parliament, you could not be a Lord, you could not have a position of authority or profit in England unless you was born of English parents, plural, right? Both your parents had to be English for you to be in any position of profit, or a member of Parliament, or the House of Lords, or a mayor, or sitting in on the council, any of them things, right? You couldn't do it. What took it away was something called the British Nationality Act in 1948, Schedule 4, hidden away in that document was the repeal of that section, right? That's unlawful. It's called ultra vires. It was an order, the British Nationality Act of 1948 and 1981, which further erased our nationalities of English, Welsh, Scottish and Irish, right? That's why everyone knows you can't put on a form English. It's got to be British, right? Well, the British Nationality Act was what created that problem, right? And what we do is explain that to people and tell people it was unlawful, right? So we're not saying you can't foreign, you can't be in this country if all that ethno nationalism is nonsense, right? Because the English Constitution does not mention race. But why was that put in the Act of Settlement? Does anyone know? Because the wonderful Prince of Orange and Princess of Orange brought people with them from Holland. And then people started taking positions of power within our Parliament and within positions of profit. then they started to attack Englishmen's rights. And then they started to use the money that was drawing English labour and sending it back to Holland, right? So they said, you can't do that. We want the Dutch out of our parliament, right? Let me just make sure I'm clear on this. The Dutch are white, right? They're not brown, right? And they're not black. They're white, but they have a different culture to us, right? So then what happened, many years later, there was a group of people, just to let you know, called the USSR. Anyone heard of it? And there was a guy called Joseph Stalin, who just happened to be Jesuit, right? He was Jesuit educated. There's a reason why Jesuits are really bad, because we had problems with Jesuits. It's why the Pope and Catholics are banned from any authority in England, right? They're not. No one is having a go at Catholic people. I certainly am not. I was married to a Catholic for 33 years. Never had any issues whatsoever, apart from the fact she's actually an atheist. But and it was a Catholic religion that turned her into an atheist, right? So the point I'm getting to is the Jesuits are a different group of people, right? They caused a war, 1848, the Sunderland War, I think it was called, in Switzerland. Does anyone know there was a massive civil war in Switzerland? Really bad civil war. That's why they've been neutral ever since, because of that war. And what they did after that war, because it was the Jesuits and the Catholic cantons versus the Protestant cantons, and then the Swiss banned Jesuits and Catholics from Switzerland, right? So everyone blames the Jews, right? I'm not suggesting there isn't a Jewish mafia. Don't forget, I'm honest. So I'm not a diplomat and I'm not a politician. I'm only here to tell you the truth from the archives of what I've actually. There is a financial Jewish mafia, right? But everyday Jews, really nice people. I know lots of them, and some of my absolute heroes, Jimmy Goldsmith is one of them, right? I look up to, right? So we've got to say there are people that are wrong, and what they've done in law is wrong, but they're not punished, and they're very powerful people. The Jesuits, in my opinion, are even worse, right? Caused a lot of what's going on now in other countries, not just here. Now in South America, a lot of the poorest border, the charities sitting on the side of Texas are actually Jesuit charities. Everyone heard of Care for Cabby? Go and have a look at their website. It's got the Jesuit emblem at the top on the right? And people were like, wow, I never knew that. And I said, all you've got to do is look. And then they do things right in front of you. So getting back to this, and the Acts of Settlement, getting back to the USSR, because it's really important, Joseph Stalin, he created something. He was the commissar of identity in the USSR, Soviet Union. And what did he create? A nationality called Soviet, right? 3 years after we won the Second World War, which we didn't, we actually lost, the British created the British Nationality Act and they raised your identity. Exactly what happened in the USSR, right? And when you understand that's what they've done, and that's why you can't refer to yourself as English, again, I want everyone to understand this, right? I've got lots of Scottish friends, lots of Irish friends, lots of Welsh friends, right? We're all friends because we're what's called true patriots. We understand that we are a brotherhood of nations. It is the statutory union that caused the problem. We already had a common law union from 1603. The British Union, statutory union, which was the start of the centralisation. Centralisation is communist in nature. Most people don't even know that England was a confederacy. And what that means is the shires and the counties were independent of Parliament, right? The only thing that governs, so they couldn't make their own laws. You've all heard of bylaws. Well, the bylaws were you making the laws that govern your community. And as long as you didn't offend against the constitutional rights and common law rights of the English Parliament and the Convention Parliament that he created, you could make any law you wanted. How many of you know that a chief constable in County Durham actually went out to his police force and said, switch off the speeding cameras. They're against the Bill of Rights. Right? This is not long ago. This is about 10 years ago. Right? Guess what happened to him? He was sacked. Right? And what he said to his officers were, if you see someone speeding, use your gun, stop the car and have a word with the driver. Explain to him that speeding kills and then send them on their way. Right? The government weren't happy with that. And they ended up sacking him. Right? Police chief constables hold a lot of power, and some of that power they shouldn't have. Everyone understands that a chief constable and every constable, there is only one constable. You're the chief, the superintendent, and the inspector. Does everyone? Well, how many people here think that police officers are public servants? They're not. Their oath is to the crown and to the monarch, not to you, and not to England, but to the crown itself. We already proved that in the High Court, and the High Court judge accepted it when I showed them what the Police Federation has actually said about the oath. So they are not, they are crown servants. They are personally responsible for anything they do against you, right? Because the king can do no wrong, but his servants can. And that's why you serve them, and you personally sue them, not the chief constable. Right? We've got a case in the High Court in a moment that's coming December 2026. So again, hopefully, I'll go through this, and I will go through it. But just to make sure you're aware, Sir John Laws, part of the lectures from the Hamlin Society, is the common law constitution. That's what we've got. So if anyone says to you, we haven't got a codified constitution, you say to them, we've got a common law constitution. What that allows is a little bit of leeway for the judges. That is far better than a fully codified constitution. A fully codified constitution is too restrictive. And don't forget, England has existed for 1100 years, not 250 years like America. But they took their constitution from us, right? English. Everyone aware that within a month of President Trump becoming president again, he sent out an official executive order in the United States of America and said the official language of the United States of America is English. He didn't say American. Didn't say American English. He said English. You know what the next executive order was? Now, Bill of Rights is written in English. He's telling everyone this is the Constitution of America and it comes from England, not the British. Right? So Sir John Law's Common Law Constitution, there's some wonderful bits in there that I've used in various court cases. Another one which is really important, and people don't know who this guy is. This is Sir William Wade, one of our scholars of English law. A.V. Dicey has got a book over there which I'll go into in a couple of minutes. The constitutional fundamentals. He's the guy who said he knew everything about the English Constitution with Lord Denning. If you go and look at our Rumble channel, there's a 2.5 hour discussion between these two people that is lost to history, right? And just getting back to Lord Denning, anyone that have Desert Island Discs? Well, Lord Denning was interviewed, and they said, "What's your song do you want to go on the Desert Island Discs?" And he said, "What's the one? Reeds or Reeves? The old English song where it's all violins and." He said, "I want that." But he then said they got into a discussion, and he said, "What do you think about English law in reference to in England?" And he said, "The only time an Englishman gets a fair trial in this country is when I'm on the bench and he has a jury, and I will ensure a fair trial." And he said, and he was an appellate court judge, which is second highest court in the country. And he said, and the only time he's guaranteed, listen to this, to get a vote in his favour is when I'm on the bench. So even if he thought you were slightly off, he'd still give you the benefit of the doubt, right? So he was a great judge. And he was working class. So again, you've got trial by jury. If everyone should understand this one. Lots of people talk about the jury system. This was written, again, handing lectures, trial by jury, little booklet, fascinating history of juries, which I'm not going to go through. It's a whole 2-hour subject on its own. But Lord Devlin, right, one of our greatest jurors, and in there, for example, this is what I think is funny about certain people that talk about juries. Let's go back to the Magna Carta. Yeah, let's press people to death if you don't come out with the right answer. That's what the juries were about, right? But the whole point of mentioning that book. So while some people refer to me as an expert, no one can be an expert in the Constitution of England or the common law of England. It's too vast. Even judges disagree with each other, right? And they're experts. That's why you have a panel. But the point of that jury book, something I learned, that women weren't allowed on juries until 1919. Did you know that? I never knew that. I thought juries was always, with men and women, but they're not. It was always men. And they had to be freeholders. So people that rented couldn't be on a jury. Right? But because they wanted someone to have skin in the game, right, you had to believe in your country and what you were doing up. And therefore, if you was a freeholder, and technically you was a man, right, that was the only group of people that was allowed on the jury. So there's lots of things that people are misled about what the law is. So before I go into any further elements of this, I am going to talk through that. I want to know what we're doing for time, because that's the bit that takes the time. So you've got these two are really important. Act of Settlement, which backs up the Bill of Rights. You've got the Coronation Oath Act, and it's really important that people understand what that is. That oath is crucially important. Because it was created by the Bill of Rights, and it was created, again, via the Crown and Parliament Recognition Act. And the reason why we had to have that was because it was a convention parliament. Because, again, I've said it once, we was a kingdom without a king, right? So we chose to put the king back in place. But the Declaration of Rights, which was and to Princess Mary, they had to agree to them terms. If you look at that book, it tells you 27 heads of terms. It's not an insignificant contract. That contract is still live on parchment, held in the House of Lords. Right? So is the Bill of Rights. It's the only statute in the House of Lords, still there, still in the library, that still retains Bill. Everything else is called a statute, right? And it's because of the whole convention. So one of the things you need to take away from this is a convention parliament is the highest form of parliament in England. There's nothing higher than that. And one of the reasons why they want a civil war is because they need to recreate a convention parliament to rewrite the constitution. And when they rewrite that constitution, they will erase every right you ever had. Are you all aware that they did that? Let me sit down and take a drink of water as well. So I've got sciatica. So if I'm up too long, I get a pain down both sides of my legs. Right, so the other side of it that you need to remember, and I'm going to go through this middle one in a couple of seconds, is in 1937, they rewrote the Southern Irish Constitution, and they replaced it with lots of words, which is for the common good, right? For the common good. It sounds innocuous, sounds lovely, right? What that means is, if all of you, or 70% of you, voted to amputate my legs because I've got sciatica, right? even though it's got nothing to do with legs, it's actually back, right? If 70% of you was to decide we want to amputate his legs because he's got that, and you took a vote on it, there's nothing I can do. And what they would say is that's all fine and dandy because it's the common good, right? Because everyone's decided that's what it is. What the Constitution tells you is if an individual stands up and says no, it is no, right? As long as it's your constitutional right and common law right, the courts should back you up, and invariably they do, as long as you know your rights. 2 people that have come to me and have been arrested for an offensive weapon in a public place, I have put forward on their behalf the English Bill of Rights and the right to self-defence and to be unarmed in your defence. And on one occasion, the judge asked him, what's your defence? Because I said, suck his solicitor and suck your barrister, and put his statement short. It was, by the way, it was a jury trial. And they hadn't called in the jury yet, and the judge said, what is your defence? And he read the statement that I'd written and said, all right, tell me what happened. And he told the judge, and the judge said, I'll find you not guilty. That was it. Didn't even call the jury in, right? That's the power of your constitution. If you understand, don't go into court demanding that the judge read out his oath, right? That's not what you should be doing, right? A judge is only a judge because he took the oath. You're not allowed to sit there, and by the way, judges can perjure their oaths. Did you know that King Alfred, listen to this, hanged 44 judges for perjuring their oaths? And the reason why it was 44 judges, and there was a lot more, it was about 300 judges that were crooked. He just took all their possessions, took their house and made them destitute. But the 44 judges that had created judgments that an Englishman died, in other words, were hung, or hanged, I should say, or various things, them judges was an eye for an eye. He said, you perjured your oath and an Englishman's died, you hang. And he hanged 44 judges, right? People don't, especially in the legal profession, they don't like me reminding them of that fact, right? But in America, by the way, they do know that. And they are a common law jurisdiction, and they refer back to English common law. So once you understand how this all works, so the Crown and Parliament Recognition Act had to be put in place before this was put in place and before the Bill of Rights was put in place. So the Crown and Parliament Recognition Act is really important as a document to the British Revolution, because that's how it recreated a Parliament and the Crown in Parliament. It's really important that people understand that that Bill of Rights is about power sharing, and it's about government by consent. So you consent to be governed, but the reason you want to have it that way, again, Cabby versus White 1703, Lord Chief Justice Holt, the guy who wrote that, he was the one who was involved in that particular case. If you do not give your consent, so if you wrote on about it, and by the way, you must vote. Anyone who doesn't vote, you're handing the country over to communists. Anyone tells you not to vote, you're handing the country to communists. They demobilise you, and that's what they've been doing, to stop you from voting, because you're all saying there's no one to vote for, right? And what I tell people, bearing in mind we're non-political, if you've got no one to vote for, write on your ballot, I do not consent, Ashby versus White, 1703. You put that in the ballot box. When they start to, so first of all they do a massive count up and get the return. And then they pull all them ballots to one side. They're telling you, this is important, that it's a spoiled ballot. There's no such thing as a spoiled ballot. Don't, I'll probably watch the language here because we want this video to go out everywhere. Don't be writing silly pictures of a sex organ, right? Or anything like that, or write swear words on it. That's just being stupid, right? Write on it in law, I do not consent, Ashby versus White 1703. when that pile is higher than any individual candidate, so let's say the winner gets 20 votes, but there's 30 votes Ashby versus White, I do not consent, you have now created a constitutional crisis because you do not consent. Right? They have to reconvene an election petition hearing, right? But they actually bring the king in. They have to, because he's the crown parliament. And he says, what's the problem? Right? And the judges, the problem is your subjects do not consent to the governments. Right? It's a massive thing. People do not realise how powerful it is in a common law. And what you're being suckered by these people that tell you not to vote. Right? I want you just to make sure you're all aware of this. Right? Communists work by demoralisation. Marxists work by demoralisation. They demoralise you into not voting. When you all stop voting, what happens to them people who are incentivised to take over your country and your laws and to install an administrative state? That 10% of the population are voting. When you stop voting, their vote appears bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? When in fact, they're only that much. They've just managed to psychologically demoralise you and you stop voting. The most important thing you can do is vote. So, again, once you understand that all them things are really important and serious, there is something I want to make sure I read out to you before I go on to the next part. 2 seconds. This particular book, Houseby's Laws of England, Houseby's Laws of England, 4th edition. This is the common law, right? Volume 8, constitutional law. What I'm going to try and do, at page 809, and again, I don't like reading laws, people, but this is important. At page 809, it talks about the civil servants, right? It is a breach of discipline for civil servants not to obey those rules. In addition, civil servants may be subjected to a purge procedure and a positive vetting procedure. The purge procedure is designed to prevent persons with communist or fascist associations being employed on work, the nature of which is vital to the security of the state. Do you all understand that? So why are there 141 Fabians elected as MPs who are wicked Marxists? Why is the whole of the cabinet currently Fabians? And the last time we had that, I said it at the beginning and I'll say it again, was Tony Blair, and we went to war with Iraq on a lie. Right? That's how dangerous it is when you don't know that that is in that law book. That is the common law of England, right? So one of the problems that we have is with cancellation, right? Because these same people have brainwashed people that we're the bad guys when we're the good guys, right? There is more that I'm going to say when we get through this slightly, because what I want you to all understand is that English or British? English. British only, technically British only really existed as a nationality from 1948. The statutory union existed, by the way, was wrong, as Scots sent a 5,000-man army to England, marching towards that British Parliament, right? I take my hat off to them people. There were riots for 2 years in Scotland. The British sent the military into Scotland to literally annihilate all of the people that was against it. By the way, they did the same to the English in 1819. It's called Peterloo, when we stood up and said we wanted to vote. They slaughtered 19 of us. By the way, the British bayoneted a baby in arms, right? So if you all think the British are nice people, I'm talking about the ruling class, British establishment, right? These people that control us, that you have no control of. Not everyday people like us, right? We are not of that character, and they've conquered. So making sure you understand that 7 years after the Acts of Union in 1707, 1706, 1707, there's two parts of the Acts of Union, was enacted, yeah? How many people knew that 7 years later it was brought before Parliament to annul it? But they never took it. Because people were so disgruntled with this. There's a book on here from A.V. Dicey, that one. And A.V. Dicey, one of them ones, probably that one. A.V. Dicey, right? Another great scholar. I didn't used to like him. Then I started reading his works. I thought, this guy really knows what he's talking about. And he started off as a unionist, right? And then he understood the law and what they was doing. He completely changed his mind. The important part of A.V. Dicey is that the left and the corrupt part of our politicians always quoted in his second book that find what he meant. The people sovereign, right? And they transfer their sovereignty when you elect your member of parliament. You lend your sovereignty to the Commons. The Commons is your domain, not the Crown domain. The Crown domain is the House of Lords. They are the peers of the King. Your peers reside as a jury in the House of Commons, right? And Parliament is both buildings together. And then you've got the third, which is the judiciary. So once you understand, again, these seminars, they're never the same. Different subjects will come up, and the question answers is 9 out of 10 times the best. If you want to start talking about militias, we have to turn the cameras off. But the militias are perfectly legal. Are we in Essex here or in Hertfordshire? Essex. Okay. Essex is such a great place. Did you know that the people of Essex and the Essex Rifles repelled the Napoleonic invasion? They went back to their cottages because every Englishman was armed, right? Went back to the beach where Napoleon was landing like an exhibition force and started shooting at them. And then they rowed back to their ships and got away from the shores because we repelled them. The people of Essex did that. Does everyone know what the peasant revolt is? Peasants' revolt did not start in Kent. It started in Essex, right? So you're very rebellious against typically against anyone in authority, which is a good thing, right? It is never a good thing to accept authority. Always question it. So the peasant revolt started because they started putting a new tax, very similar to a poll tax, but in a particular village, the king's men come out, and one of the ways they could that this tax was on marriage. So there was a particular group of people, those king's soldiers and tax collectors, and they started to physically examine some of the women of the village. Right? So they were sticking their fingers where they weren't wanted to check for virginity. And if you were seen not to be a virgin, you was married and therefore you was taxable. Right? Well, it turns out that the baker wasn't very happy with this soldier sticking his fingers near his daughter, and basically went back, got his sword, come back and went whack and cut his head off. and it all kicked off in the village, right? So they'd done the first lot of soldiers. Go on, Essex! Right? They went back, and the soldiers, one or two of them soldiers escaped. By the way, my history lessons are like no one else. And then they come back and they said, we've got a rebellion, right? But they haven't said what they were doing. No one gave them permission to do that. They were just taking advantage of their power, right? They got back and they sent another group of soldiers. But as they did, the original village sent out a message to the other villagers. And the other villagers said, we're not happy with that. So they all drew their. There was another big scrap. By this time it had gone, the message had gone out to Norfolk, Hertfordshire, Kent, and then they started making their way to River Thames. River Thames wasn't what it was like now. And they come across the River Thames, exactly where I used to live in Erith, right? And they crossed the Thames, and this army of people started to form, all up. They then started to cross down and went to Canterbury. And one of them had been arrested, and they locked him in Rochester Castle, right? Did you know that? So what did the people do? They surrounded the castle and said, let him out, or we're storming the castle and we're going to do everyone in there bar our mate. Either let him out or we're doing you. Next thing you know, the drawbridge went, and out he walks, right? And then, this is simplifying it by the way, they then marched on London, and the meeting point was Blackheath, or Blackheath Common. And then, within days, they had marched on London. That's where Black Tyler came into it, and various other people. But Black Tyler was just one of the people they executed, part of the problem of the Peasants' Revolt. And this is always the problem, is one group of people got what they wanted, right? So they started to move away from the protest, leaving other people that were standing out and saying, no, we can't leave until we get everything. The people that they left to carry on got slaughtered, right? Because the rest of them wouldn't back them up. The problem with patriots, right, and I mean real patriots, is you're like herding cats, right? Sheep are easy, communists are easy, fascists are easy, right? Why is it? Because it's centralised, they all do what they're doing, and they say, listen, this is what we've got to achieve, let's get there, then we'll argue later, right? And they all move forward with one. Except patriots like us and free thinkers, people who have got critical thought, they're saying, I don't agree with that. And you'll argue now, not later, right? That's why we look disorganised, but we're not in reality. We're just proper thinking people, unlike them. I've got one other quick question before I go through this, and I have to watch the time because I could talk for hours about all this. I'll ask you a question. I understand that communism is on the left. Would that be fair to say? You understand? Where do you think Nazis stand? Left or right? Where? Right. But show hands if you think Nazis are right wing. Right. Show hands if you think Nazis are left wing. Right. The left have it. Nazis are National Socialists. Right? And no, I'm not goose-stepping. I'm just trying to get the scientific working. Right? Nazis are exactly, and I've just told you from the law books, if you are an Englishman, and a true Englishman, you do not allow fascism, and you do not allow communism. Why? Because they are both authoritarian government, and the English have never accepted that. Right? That's what you put forward and say, we do not accept the government doing X, Y, Z, Foxtrot, right? And that's the way we've always been. So Nazis are on the left. But who was it that conjured into believing that Nazis were on the right? Mainstream media, political parties, they're all the same group of people, right? And they've lied to you. Universities, slow march through the institutions. Does everyone understand that the question was put to President Xi of China? And they said to him, what do you think of the success of the French Revolution? And do you know what he said? It's too early to tell. Right? Communism and fascism is multi-generational, bit by bit by bit. So you don't realise they're taking your rights off you. There's certain things I could explain to you and you would go, wow, I never knew that was linked to that. Statutory instruments, which is about 20 below the power of that, is one of the ways they've been using. Everyone heard of an attachment of earnings? Right, where that was done by statutory instrument, where they can actually take your wages without even going to court, right? And it was done by statute. That is completely unlawful, right? But they managed to do it. And the rule is, if they put a statutory instrument in place and no one is complained in 3 months, it doesn't need to have a vote in the House. So what they do is they get a statutory instrument in place and don't use it and don't publicise it for 3 months, 6 months or whatever, but it's in place. So it's had effect on you, but all of a sudden you go past the legal element that they say you can't do this. There's lots of things that they're doing now that is completely unlawful. But again, if you look at some of these books, this one here, all the volumes of it's a very old book. Law and Custom of the Constitution, Anson, Volume 1. He's one of our greatest scholars. They talk in the old books about something, the cabal. Right? Everyone heard about something, the cabal. Right? Did you know that the cabal existed for hundreds of years? The ruling classes have existed for hundreds of years. Some people call it an oligarch, some people call it corporations, some people call it all sorts of things, but what it is, and our ancestors called it a cabal. We have always had issues with these people. Where did we used to convene to discuss these issues? Outhouses, pubs. What was the first thing they did during COVID? Shut the pubs. Right. What was the place that they was out of trouble when we was cancelled, right, on our other cancelled property? This place, what is it technically? An outhouse, right? Yeah. So the outhouses was always crucial to England, right, because the people used to talk to each other. And they had freedom of expression. If you want me to go through some of them, and I can read them out to you, it tells you what your rights are, your common law rights. It's actually listed. So freedom of expression, freedom of association, anyone involved with protests at the moment, you have the perfect right to protest. They've tried to curtail it slightly, that if you're going on a march, you have to tell them and give them permission. You never have to give the police any notification, don't matter how big it's going to be, for an assembly. An assembly is a statutory protest. In law, it is still constitutionally protected, right? So as long as you're going to one place and you don't move. I was at Rotherham some years ago, and the police was trying to get us to push around to this other area. I said, I'm not leaving. It's exactly where I said I'm not moving. One other guy, unfortunately named Peter Lynch, who's now dead, he kept trying to get me to march on the street. So if you do that, you're giving them the opportunity to nick you. Don't give them the opportunity to nick you. Stay here, right? And he wanted it, and he did, and he got nicked, right? So what I'm saying to you is, the other thing is, for protests, and some of this will come up later, are you all aware as Englishmen, it is your duty to make sure that no one commits a crime in front of you? You're all aware of that? Are you all aware that you have, under English law, the right to citizen's arrest, right? You have the same powers as a police constable. The only thing that you cannot do, they have something called a general warrant, right? right? And that's what they take their oath for, to get the general warrant. So they can arrest someone when they haven't seen the crime being committed, but they need information, right? It used to be called in the old days, and information. It's a statement from someone. So if you go and make a statement against someone, sign it and say, I witnessed that person commit a crime, the police officer can then go and arrest them, right? But you, if you see a crime being committed, doesn't matter what the crime is, you can arrest that person on the spot, you can detain them, and guess what, people? That includes you can arrest police constables. Right. So one thing I want to make sure is and this is for protest environments, and I've seen it happen a number of times, that police officers draw batons, right? Is a threat of violence. It is called assault, right? Aggression, and what I mean by that is if you walk up to someone and you're shaping up, right? They can knock you sparking out. All this, they must throw a punch first, is nonsense. If you believe someone is about to hit you, you can knock them spark out. Do not do anything else if you do knock them out. That's the bit that's illegal, right? If someone's unconscious, you don't kick them in the head, because they can't defend themselves. So you're hitting someone who is defenceless. That is highly illegal, right? The point I'm making is when them police officers pull out their batons, they are then committing a criminal offence, and the criminal offence is assault, which is the threat of violence. If they hit you with a baton, that's battery. And then there's various that go up in the law, all the way up to section Offences Against the People's Act 1861. So if you was to use a baton against someone and you cut them as well, or you hurt them, or you break their legs, which someone did, 4 coppers did to a guy for no reason in Hertfordshire, and snapped his shins with their batons for nothing, right? Never been had no criminal convictions. He didn't even have a warrant out for it, right? And that's what they did to him. By the way, it's all on camera. Someone else has videoed it. The important part of what I'm saying is that offence is a section 18, which means with intent. Right? So if you hit someone with a baton and you snap their leg, that's obviously with intent to injure them seriously, right? That carries a life sentence. Not only does it carry a life sentence, there is aggravating factors. So, for example, if it's obvious they're attacking you because you're waving an English flag, which is often what they're doing to us now, attacking the English, and I'm going to get to another quick point before I go further. You've got to understand that you have the right to arrest them. And I've tried to tell people that. When you go to a protest, when they start being aggressive towards you, if you are calm, collected, and the other thing is I don't think we've brought it with us, in the High Court, if you've got a high vis on with legal observer on the front and legal observer on the back, the High Court accepts you as a professional witness. Did everyone know that? You are not allowed to speak, interfere, or what you are allowed to do, and this is for the auditors, so there's a number of people that go out and audit the police, etc. It's very similar to auditing. You're not allowed to talk to them, you're not allowed to be on the side of the protester or on the side of the police. But if you are an independent witness, and that's what you're regarded as by the High Court, this has already been proven in law, by the way, you videoed it and taken notes, so then you say to the judge, here is my video evidence, here is my notes, this is what happened. And then the judge goes, okay, let's have a look at this, right? And that's where you can benefit yourselves. It takes, and you can ask the auditors this, a lot of mental discipline not to get involved. But you must realise, for you to be a professional witness and regarded as that by the High Court, you must have a higher level of professionalism, not to get involved. Just to stand back. If you go and watch police officers arrest people, if there's a bit of a disturbance, you have to see two of them will stand back, right? And all they're doing is observing. And then it's their details, they write down, he did this, he did that, he did that. And then them two officers will come forward and give evidence, because the other coppers are involved with actually trying to sort it out. The other ones stand back, they're observing, right? And that's what they're trained to do. So part of my job is to train you to do that. And people, you forget now how easy it is for us to have access to cameras, or Cabby going somewhere, or going somewhere. All these people, especially the auditors, right? The auditors have already been technically pre-trained. Some of them, is it AY auditors? He's very good. I was really impressed with some of the stuff he did, right? The point being, he's actually videoing, and then if he gets into it, I mean, he even said to one police officer, the police officer said, if you don't leave, I'm going. And he turned around and he said, if you touch me, I'm going to arrest you. I am going to citizens arrest you. Do you understand that? And you could see the copper's face change. He went, right? And he didn't touch him, didn't arrest him. But what AY Audits was telling the copper is, I know my rights. My right is, I've done nothing wrong. You lay a finger on me, it's an unlawful arrest. You lay a finger on me, it is battery if you touch me, and your aggressiveness is assault. Do you understand that? And the police were like, okay. Do you know what I mean? They haven't been trained well enough, by the way, police. I mean, they used to be. Let me have a drink of this water. I mean, I'm not sure, how far are we into this so far? Does anyone want to use the loo now? And then I'll go through that part and then we'll do a questions and answers. Well, we've got another 30 minutes so far, but there's a few people shooting out to the toilet. Toilets are that way! Hang on 2 seconds, let me grab a drink of water.
Just a quick interjection, folks. I see some of you complaining about the sound. Graham is using a mic provided by someone else, and as you can see, he got it up to his mouth quite a lot.
Comfort break now, because it looks like people do want to do that. So we'll reconvene in 15 minutes, but we need to be prompt, and then I'll go through some final points and then go through your rights.
Yeah, so I will work on that and try and get these uploaded as separate things. But, you know, it is what it is. I did speak to Graham about mics at the beginning, but he's got 2 lapel mics on already, and the one he's been given, the one he's been talking through is attached to the PA system for the venue we're at. But the issue is, I think it's where he's held it too close to his mouth. Where when this live actually finishes, I'll play it back and see what's going on. Internet is iffy here. Yeah, I'm on 5G, and it's been stable in the main, but hopefully it'll be good enough. And also what I'll do, as in last time, I actually managed to get hold of the actual footage that I had before, and I'll be able to get clearer versions of it up on. Anyway, I'm going to mute the I'll leave it live, but I'll mute it till Graham comes back. Just so you're all aware, everybody, I've moved the mic that I was using to the back of the room near Emma's. So we'll see what happens. I was just talking in the break, and I've just discovered that although my viewing angle's all right, I'm sat quite near a PA speaker, and that with Graham holding the mic quite close to his mouth as well might have affected the sound. So with the mic at the back, we'll see how that goes. So let me know when Graham starts talking again.
About to start our first point of Guinness. Thank you very much. And we are pleased to have Sean with us, who is now sitting at the front. We're going to give him a shot. We ain't sitting on a shot. So, just to make sure everyone realises this, this is not a political event, right? It is an educational seminar on your rights. One group of people that we support, other than near enough everyone and anyone, right? So it doesn't matter what colour you are, what colour your skin is. Technically, religion comes into the Constitution, and the greatest group of people that are protected because we are persecuted, are Protestants, whether you like it or not, right? We are the persecuted people, and we always have been, which is what the Glorious Revolution tried to resolve. But the most important thing that you need to realise is we're the only group of people sticking up for people with disabilities, right? Everyone should understand that, and I'm not going to point Sean out, but he's 30% blind, manages to get to our court cases in London, doesn't just sit on the internet watching us, actually comes up and supports us, and comes into the courts and listens to what's going on, right? So those people, especially the council that cancelled us on the last event, this is the court, and it will be, a number of people with disabilities are going to be brought to court as our witnesses, but we are not left or right wing. We are constitutionalists and believe in the rule of law, right? That's what we believe in. And that means that the state cannot do certain things to you without them being brought to the courts, right? So there's a number of issues that I could talk about, but I won't on this session. There was one on the last one, because I was about to finish something off and I can't remember what it was. Don't forget, none of this is scripted. If you script something and you do all these, you know, little chipmunks that we went through, boring presentations where everyone starts falling asleep, right? My goal really is just to talk about this, and as I've said previously, I could talk for 18 hours non-stop about Constitution and English law. But what we are going to do is just briefly go through this here, right? So, again, in St George's flag, the original flag is the Griffin, and without going through the history of it, we ended up with the St George's flag. I can go into some more detail. Everyone heard of the Irish Sea? You know, where is it? Huh? So it's between England and Ireland. Do you know what it was originally called? The St George's Channel. Right? It was stolen from us. And when I say stolen from us, it was renamed. Right? This is a permanent attack on England, English rights, right, and the rule of law, because they're trying to superimpose administrative law and destroy England with regionalisation. Once they've done that and they're successful, England will no longer exist, ever. It's gone. And we should never be the generation that allows it to happen. Right? Again, I'm going to go through these and then we'll go through questions and answers. So below are the common law constitutional rights belonging to the English. And it doesn't matter whether you're black, brown, or any other shade in between, you are regarded as English. Right? What they don't like, EFI nationalists, is they believe that only white people are English. Right? That's not true. Right? There are, there isn't ethnically English people there. In other words, my history in this country goes all the way back to the year 1200 and a Norfolk Knight. Right? So you can't deny that there is an indigenous population of English. Right? But my rights and a black or brown person's rights are exactly the same. The only bit that changes it is the Acts of Settlement that says they must have 3 generations living here before they can become a member of Parliament. And it is so they understand our history and our culture. Right? That means it safeguards and protects English culture going forward. Right? That means people like Sally Khan, who can I think of? David Lammy, Dion Abbey, right? They're culturally not of England, right? They're commoners. David Lammy's family come from Guyana, that's it. Well done. And anyone heard of Gina Miller? Yes. Everyone must have heard of Gina Miller. She brought a case to do with Article 50. That's to do with European Union. Do you know who her father was? The Attorney General of Guyana, who was a committed communist. Right? And Guyana had a massive civil war. And the British controlled it, right? But they had a massive civil war. And it caused lots and lots of problems out there. Her father was the Attorney General. So people made out she's just this lovely little lady. You don't know her history. And when you start looking into the history, you will always see communism. So getting back to this, the right of the realm of England and its subjects to defend themselves. Article 5 or 7 of the English Bill of Rights. And what does it do? It actually tells you, and if I was going to go back to this book here, not that one, but that one, the common law rights, the book on the right, volume 8, it largely goes through the Bill of Rights. If I can find a page. You're a lawyer. Find me the Bill of Rights on the page, and then I'll actually talk through some of them, only because they're interesting. What I don't do at these events is go analyse that constitutional law, by the way. Do is just go through where the Bill of Rights is, the fact that it is still law, the fact that Her Majesty the Queen on July 21st, 1988 made a declaration to both houses of Parliament that the Bill of Rights was still in full force. The very next day, and basically she said it is the cornerstone of our democracy and it is where separation of powers come from. Right? What happened then was she went to a place called Brixton in Devon, where there's a monument to King Belly, and there was a monument there, well done, I knew you'd find it pretty annoying. You can be much embarrassing, didn't you? So the Bill of Rights is there. What I'm going to do, it goes from so the actual rights to England. So what I'm going to do is just go to freedom of speech, suspected power, every right to petition. Because you all can tell you a quick story about that. Subjects' arms. The subjects which are Protestants may have arms for their defence suitable for their conditions and as allowed by law. What does allowed by law mean? Well, if you go into the declaration in that book and the heads of terms of the declaration, they tell you what as allowed by law means. The current population of whoever, judiciary, etc., say, oh, well, we can create a law restricting your right to arms. That's not what it means. It means you can have arms for everything as long as you do not commit a crime with them. So you, as allowed by law, you can have a firearm, you can have a knife, you can have anything you like, but you are told If you use that in a criminal way, armed robbery, killing someone, whatever, in other words, murder is always been an offence, a common law offence in this country, right? So therefore, that is highly illegal. I mean, they used to hang you for it. If you do any of them things with your weapons, we was a high trust society, right? So we obeyed the law. If you was told you cannot murder someone, believe it or not, most of the population didn't murder anyone, right? And obviously it's very un-Christian. Let me go through it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to keep that open. Hopefully you won't go back onto my thing, because I'm going to come back to a few of these things. This is what I'm saying, it's all laws in the law books, right? The right to a jury. Who's taking away our jury? What they're going into? They're going into saying what used to be known as the equity courts that didn't have juries. What was the equity? It also got referred to as the Star Chamber. Who abolished the Star Chamber because it had no juries and it was really nasty? Who abolished it? The English, right? Equity courts deal with other things. They deal with trusts, but it is a tribunal. It is a judge. There is no jury involved. Your peers are not involved with the decision making. Everyone know here that if you go in front of a jury and you get found not guilty, are you all aware that that cannot be appealed by the state? Jury's decision is final. Whereas if the judge makes errors during the trial, that can be appealed. Questions asked though, but keep the question there. People need to understand that took away something else that you all had, which is a protection of your rights. Does anyone know what that is? 1929, I think it was. They abolished grand juries. What have they still got in America that you haven't got here? Grand juries. Grand juries held the state and people who work for the state, grand servants, to authority, your authority, right, as jurors. So if something happened, let's say, I don't know, someone's doing something they shouldn't have been, taking backhanders as an MP, or does that already happen, man? It's lobbyists, right? When that type of thing happens, you got brought up in front of the grand jury. What does a grand jury do? Right? Are you all aware that they can be held in secret? Do you know that you don't tell the person? Sounds really unfair, doesn't it? But it's not a prosecution. It's to find probable cause for you to be arrested, right? It's a protection mechanism. So if that jury says they listen to the evidence and they say there's no bill, or we don't believe this person should be prosecuted, you won't even know you've been investigated, and everyone walks away from it. You've got no stain on your character whatsoever. If the bill of indictment is given by the jury, that gives authority to the police and to the prosecutors to arrest you for what you've been indicted for, because the jury have listened to the evidence and believe that you should be prosecuted and there is probable cause that you need to answer, right? What happens then is they arrest you. When they arrest you, under the American and English, you have the right to remain silent. Because it's for the state to prosecute you.
Excuse me, can you repeat that please? I missed it.
The right to remain silent and the right to a jury is fine. So, the right to remain silent, in American terms, and where they get from England, right, is the Fifth Amendment. Everyone heard of the Fifth Amendment? Well, we call it the right to remain silent. Again, it's been gradually eroded, right? And they wasn't allowed to touch that. That's the way they've been operating, bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. But getting back to the indictment, if they was to arrest you, they turn up and then you say nothing. So one thing that you must remember if you're arrested, do not speak to them at all. Right? Golden rule is silence. By law in this country, you do not have to give them any information. The only problem you'll ever get is if they say to you, I suspect you have committed this crime, about your name and address, if you don't give it, they can arrest you for not giving your name and address, but only if they suspect you've committed a crime. If they arrest you and you haven't committed a crime and you've refused to give them name and address, that is an offence. They have committed against you. That's already been proven in court, right? So there's a big case that dealt with that, and funny enough, it was during COVID that they said, you can't do that. Basically, a guy got arrested, he took his car from an MOT. Police said, what are you doing? He said, MOT in the car. They said, we want your name and address. He said, why? They said, because of coronavirus, you've committed an offence. He said, no, I haven't. And they said, we want your address. He said, I'm refusing to give it. I've committed no offence. You know, and go away, and they arrested him. It then went to the High Court, and the High Court said, he was right. He's not committing an offence. He was MOT in his car, which was allowed under coronavirus rules, and he's told you what he was doing, and you still arrested him. That's where they can be held to account. Again, the right to remain silent, they're now removing that. Everyone's heard of what they're using as terrorism act, right? And you must hand over your phone, right? So when I come through the airports, I have to be careful, especially when I come back from Northern Ireland, right? Because they're waiting for you, and they'll claim your phone, they'll claim your details, and say you must give us your passwords. Right, the first thing I say when they say that is no comment. The only difference with me is they would actually get the challenge of me in court rather than a solicitor or a barrister who is British, who are not really going to stand for your rights. Does everyone understand you've got the right of property freehold? I'm going to say something really strange now by telling you that, and have a drink of my Guinness. It tastes much better than water, right? The right of property freehold. I'm not going to ask anyone to put their hands up. Any property freeholders here, unless you have something called fee simple absolute, you are not a freeholder. Because the Crown can take your property any time they want. In fact, if you was to lease your freehold tomorrow and a tenant was to go in and you're on a leasehold, the Leasehold Act of 1993, I think it was, reversed the law, constitutional rights of the freeholder, and the person that's moved into your property and the freeholder can be forced to sell the tenant the property. Right? If you can be forced to sell your freehold, you are not a freeholder. Just getting back to this, is everyone aware of 3 acres at Runnymede in Surrey? JFK Memorial. Right. There's a law, and Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II, both, right? Both Parliament and the Queen gave 3 acres to the United States of America. It is, go and read it, look it up online, JFK Memorial, right, 3 acres, fee simple absolute. What does that mean? It means everything under the ground, above the ground, right the way up to the stars, belongs to you, right? You are sovereign on that land. A crucial piece of law. That means the United States of America has an enclave in England at Runnymede, right? That means, and this is especially to any of our alternative media friends, if you wanted to do a speech anywhere, and let's say it offends against the online act of whatever, freedom of speech, etc., and you was to go to that enclave, you was to transmit that speech, which in America would be free speech and free expression, you would not be arrested for it. But in England now, under British rule, it would be an offence, and they arrested you, they can't. Why not? Because you're covered by the American Constitution. It's not, that land is not English, that land is not Scottish, it's not Welsh, it's not Irish, it's not British. It is an American income. Right? How do I know this? Because during COVID, I did exactly that. I went exactly to that piece of land. 3 armed police officers come marching up to us on that land. And it was just, we had someone with us that was ex-military, who just happened to be ex-SAS as well, but I won't go into more detail on that. And he walked up to the coppers and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We've just come up to them." He said, "Really?" He said, "Take them firearms and take yourself and get off this land. You've got no jurisdiction here whatsoever." And they went, "Okay." And they knew and left. Right? We're going to get back to something else in a couple of minutes. So, but all I'm saying is, technically, you do not have freehold rights, right? Because unless you've got fee simple absolute, you've got no rights to your property whatsoever. That's why it's easy to get you evicted. Councils can go for, I forget what it's called, where they can come along and do a compulsory to take your property, then you ain't got freehold. If anyone can do that. But it's really important for you to understand that you were sovereign on that land, and that's a fact, that's not fiction, right? The right to earn a living, another one come up during COVID. Where does it come from? Something called restraint of trade. Restraint of trade come about because the Crown, 800 years ago, started putting restrictions on printers who were printing playing cards. And it said only printers that were authorised by the Crown could print. The reason was people kept printing playing cards. You know, like we had memes taking the nick out of people, I mean severely. I mean some of the memes are a bit naughty. You want to see them again. I've got books on the Glorious Revolution where they show what was on the back of the playing cards. Guess what? It was just like us. They put all these images on. So the Crown said, "We're not allowing that." This goes back even further. And they said, "We're going to put this clamp down and you can't do it." Well, it went to the courts. And the court said, "That is a monopoly. You cannot have, no one in this country can have a monopoly. It's against the law, right? So it's called restraint of trade. No one is allowed to restrain you from earning a living, right? So this is interesting in lots of ways. Who's the person most recently that's famous that's used it? Everyone heard of Wayne Rooney? No. So Wayne Rooney was in the High Court, and the reason was because he had contracted with a particular organisation for his image rights. And he fell out with the company, and because he'd signed a contract, they then said, "We've got your image rights because you signed this contract." He challenged it. He lost in the first court, and then it went, listen to this, to the Supreme Court. And in the lower court, High Court, they said, "We're not interested in ancient laws and rights." So he appealed it because he had the money to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, "We are a common law jurisdiction. We believe in stare decisis. Of course, we're interested in our ancient rights and customs. That's who we are." It then listed about 7 cases going back through 800 years. This is how clever the Supreme Court judges are. They knew every single case to say, what you've just declared in that lower court is unlawful. They then found in favour of Wayne Rooney, and Wayne Rooney won back all his image rights. Because what they said was that is a restraint of trade. You're stopping him earning a living. Right? Why is it important? Because if someone was to put a contract, let's say you are, let's think of something, let's say you're a carpenter and you work locally and you work for this company and the company says, "We're taking you on," you take them on, you sign their terms and conditions and then you leave them. And then they say, "You cannot work as a carpenter for the next 15 years. You must not work in this area or at least 100 miles." That's called a trade. Take that straight to court and you will win, right? They're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to stop you earning a living, right? It's one of the reasons journalists don't know that fact, and they should do, because no one's allowed to stop you being a journalist. You don't need a qualification to be a journalist, right? So that's one of the things that we always point up. Right to freedom of navigation and trade. You have the right. This is the bit that most people go, really? Right? By the way, it's also in one of these little books Sir William Wade wrote about it. Who thinks they need a passport to travel? No, you don't. You do not need a passport. In common law jurisdictions, you do not need a passport, right? And Sir William Wade actually said that in his book, because I was on a yacht, and he's gone all around the world without a passport, right? And he's basically said, I don't need a passport to enter your port, right? There are some clarifications of that. Do you know who created passports? The French, right? So administrative law jurisdictions, they will often say you need a passport, you need identification, blah, blah, blah. That's where all this national ID stuff is coming in, because they're moving you closer and closer to an administrative law admin, where you lose control of all of your rights. But in a common law jurisdiction, if you go to a common law country, so if I was to travel by boat from England to the United States of America, a common law jurisdiction, I do not need a passport. That isn't to say that the Americans could say, we want to check you out. Of course they can. But they won't say, we're going to kick you out because you haven't got a passport. Because the common law says we can travel between what used to be known as dominions. There's a difference between a dominion and a colony. Colonies are British, dominions are English, right? And the English way was that we had common law and we assisted the dominions, right, with the law. I'm flying through this, by the way. The right to bring up and protect our children almost abolished by the family courts, right? It's one of the biggest disasters in England ever. It's almost an adaptation of the Star Chamber, which is the equity courts, because in the family courts there are no jurors, right? And again, sadly, part of the problem with that was Lady Howe and pushing through lots of protections for women, right? So I understand some of it, but not all of it. But once they broke the father had over the family and introduced more women over the whole thing, once they'd done that, then they attacked the women, right? Which is what they're doing now. That's why I was involved with a case where they killed a 6-year-old girl by switching off a life support machine. The point being, and I think I'm still right in saying, I am the only layperson that has ever got an injunction against the British government and won in the European Court of Human Rights. So often when I go against these people and they say, oh yeah, who are you? When they start to learn, hang on a minute, he actually got an injunction against the British government. Right, so all of these things people need to understand. I learned this myself over 30 years for a specific reason. You can all do the same thing, right? Retirees are the best possible people to learn all this. Why? Because you've already had a successful career and you can also now see how they're affecting your grandchildren and your great-great-grandchildren, right? If you don't start getting your head around this, and it's simple, it's not difficult, right? And then start challenging them, that's when they start to get frightened. That's why they don't like us. That's why they cancel us. That's why they imply we're the bad guys, not the good guys, right? When all we do is protect people. The right to bring up and protect your children. Most of your rights, so the state now, if they had a problem with any of you and your kids, they would put in place a guardian, a state guardian, right? That was always unlawful back then. And I'm not kidding how much power they've got. They'll come in and take all your kids off you if you say the wrong thing, right? It's got so far towards a communist nation, it is more than worrying. They've started to terrorise a lot of people. The right to habeas corpus. Do you all understand what habeas corpus is? Show me the body, right? What does it mean? If I was to grab hold of this gentleman here, cut him off and lock him in a room, right? And again, this goes back through the history of why it exists. Someone who knows he's locked in there could go to the High Court and say, Mr. So-and-so is locked in this room and there's no lawful reason for him to be there, right? The judges will wipe everything to one side and say, this is the habeas corpus, we must listen to it. And then they say, show me the body. So then they have to bring that person into the High Court. They stand there and they'll say, what right have you got to keep that person locked up? And if you haven't got any right, the judge will look through it, look through the law, look through your reasoning, and then say, release him, and you'll walk free from the court, right? It happens a lot nowadays with people who are finished their prison sentences, for example, right? And the governor says, I ain't letting you out this week, I'll let you out next month, because I am the governor and I can do what I like. Next thing you know, you get a habeas corpus straight in there. And then the judge will say, release it now, right? And that's it, and you walk out of the court. So habeas corpus is still a law in this country. Don't forget, I'm flying through these and I'm just giving you an indication, but all of these virtually come from the Bill of Rights and other parts. That the pretended power of suspending laws is illegal. Lots of things. COVID was a particular example, but there's many other things where they say they can suspend your right for something. The worst possible thing is the European Convention for Human Rights. Does anyone know why? European Convention for Human Rights are what's known as qualified rights. That means if the government declares an emergency, they can cancel your right. These rights, and English rights, are non-qualifiable. What does that mean? They are inalienable. They were given to you by God. This is based on Christian law. They cannot take their rights off you. Right? That's the biggest difference between the European Convention of Human Rights, even the Declaration of Rights from the UN, and this. Right? Is that these are inalienable rights. The same as the United States of America, which is where they get it from. The right to assert English ancient rights and liberties. Anyone heard of the expression, he has standing? Right. So, I was having this conversation earlier, meaning I cannot represent you in a court of law because they have monopolised the system for them to earn money out of it. Last time that happened was Cromwell, Oliver Cromwell, and he actually stopped that. Right? He actually stopped people talking a foreign language in that court. There's lots of things that Cromwell did. I'm not saying he was a nice guy, by the way. I'm just saying he did do things that are still law today. Right? And he also created a fully codified constitution. And one of them things in that constitution, I'm sure it was Article 39 of Cromwell, he said, if anyone makes a law against the rights of an Englishman, it is nullified. Right? So all the way through history, even as a republic, it always went back to English rights. No one could go back against your rights. So again, the 10 principle, asserting rights and liberties, so you have standing, you will have the right as individuals, if you understand the law, if you get arrested, you do not need a solicitor, you do not need a barrister. What you do need to say is when you were arrested, right, no comment. As soon as you say no comment, and these people that stand back and say, well, I've done nothing wrong, so I did this and that, you've just backed yourself up. shut up. Do not say anything. They are not your friends. They are not there to be your friends. They are there to put you behind the door. That's what they get their bonuses for. By the way, it's already been confirmed that on many occasions, that the more nicks they get, the more bonus they get. Right? Police constables, on average, police constables retire with an £80,000 back pocket lump sum. None of you really got that. Do you know that chief constables get somewhere in the region of £500,000 completely non-taxed cash at the end of it, and they get 2/3 pensions? That's why these people are taking liberties, is for their pensions. That's a socialist scheme. It's called forward bribing, right? So remember that them police constables are on a lot of money, and it's their pensions that they will take liberties with you, and no one will go against each other on the police, right? They're not good guys. Rights was English ancient rights and liberties. Pretending power of dispensing with laws is illegal, meaning it was more related to the Crown, because the Crown at the time was saying, I don't know, like Lord Council. You can't do that, but you can void laws, right? If a law is found to be unconstitutional, and this has already been said, by the way, it's already in the law. The Lord Chancellor most recently said that if you used to do something that is blatantly against the law, the liberties and rights of the people, then the courts will step in, right? Not been done for a long time, but they should be. The right to petition the monarch, commitments and prosecutions for such petitioning are illegal. Did everyone hear about me getting arrested outside Buckingham Palace? Have you heard that one? Did you want me to briefly tell you what happened? So, I notified Her Majesty the Queen, lovely lady, and her old man, the geezer called Prince Philip, right? And I said, we'll be petitioning outside the Buckingham House, Buckingham Palace, at 76th day. Gone there, 30, 50 of us turn up. I start doing the petition. There's loads of Americans there, loads of tourists. Oh, look at this, look at this. I'm talking about the Constitution and constitutional rights. In come 30-old Bill, arrested me, handcuffed me, dragged me off, put me in the back of the van. I've blown a whistle, right, which is, blowing the horn was the English way of warning people of danger. Cop didn't like that. And then they took me off to the station. I never said anything, didn't speak to them. Funniest bit was I had the letter E on my t-shirt that fell off in the back of the van. When the chief super turns up, as I'm getting out of the van, I've got me and two coppers looking for the E. And then he went, what are you looking for? And I said, this is the first time in my life I've had two police officers looking for an E in the back of their motor. And then, because the coppers were laughing, the superintendent was in fits, right? So, anyway, it goes forward and they prosecute me. It was in court number 1 of Westminster Magistrates, the worst court in the country, and it was a judge. And the judge said there was about 100 of us in the actual gallery. Support and public support is really important on these cases. So the judge said, would you rely on your defence, Mr. Moore? And I said, Coronation Oath Act and the English Bill of Rights. He said, is this going to be a constitutional defence? I said, oh yes sir. Right? So he turns to the prosecution and he says to the prosecution, have you got any video evidence of Mr. Moore? She stood up, she said, oh, you're on. So he said, there's 30 police officers with all the cameras. Are you telling me they was all switched off? And she went, yes, my lord. Or yes, my lord. All right. She went to sit down. He said, no. He said, have you got any statements from the police? And she stood up again and said, no statements. So he said, you've not got a single statement from a single police officer, 30 police officers, a number of sergeants, number of constables, a chief superintendent and an inspector, and you've got no witness statements. She went, no. He then said, so what are you going to do? And she stood up and said, we offer no evidence, Your Honour. Right? The whole gallery erupted in applause. Right? And then the judge said to the gallery, "This is not a pantomime." And one of my mates shouted back, "Oh yes it is." And that's actually a true event. We all went down the pub. The point being, the judge then said, "Mr. Moore, how much did it cost you to come to court with your witnesses?" He said, 350 quid. He said, "Prosecution, write him that cheque now, today, for his £350 expenses, because he should never have been brought through the court." They went, "We will." Right? They give me 350 quid. The question to you all is, why did they do that? Why do you think that the police and CPS would not offer any evidence against me? Where does it say it? The right to petition the monarch, commitments and prosecutions for such petitioning are illegal. It's a criminal offence. In the English Bill of Rights, there is a public injunction against them arresting me for petitioning the monarch. Highly illegal. Because I knew my rights, I stood up against them. Right? What I did was prove it to people. And then they went, "Wow, you just got a judge is not guilty, a non-prosecution in one of the worst courts in the whole of the country, with one of the nastiest judges," and trust me, he was, right? And everyone just said, "Leave him alone." Because they all know, here's the kicker: the police can be prosecuted, the prosecutor can be prosecuted, and the judge can be prosecuted. They all went, "Drop this like an hot potato. You've just severely caused a problem." So again, it's knowing that you can do it. The election of members of Parliament ought to be free. Really? Right, so I've just done an election petition. I stood in London as an English constitutionalist. The people need to understand that you're not allowed to cheat in an election in any way. No one's allowed to interfere with an election in any way. It goes all the way back to the first statute of Westminster, chapter 5, and there are severe penalties, and including the English Bill of Rights that says, at Article 8, elections ought to be free. That means free from any interference from the state, or anyone else. No one is allowed to. It goes back to Ashby versus White, remember me? All of that is backed up as constitutional law. So, I brought an election petition. Important why you should vote. A single elector can bring an election petition in the High Court. You're all aware of that. If you don't vote, you lose your right to bring an election petition. As soon as you use your right, then you can bring an election petition. We can crash this whole system if people just listened to the law, right, and understand what we're planning in the background. They started doing it in Southern Ireland, by the way. They've started to listen. Ought to be free. So just to make sure you're all aware, I won the first 2 cases for the election petition with legal arguments against 2 King Counsel, an army of barristers and an army of solicitors in the High Court. Me presenting the case, right? 90 of us in court. They lost their argument. They said the petition must go ahead. 2 High Court judges go to, at that time it was in Chester, where I prosecute the returning officer and Sarah Patching MP, right? Literally. Then they decided to appeal it, right? There's a particular reason why they wanted to appeal it. So it was in the appellate court. Appellate court is the second highest court in the country. And I stood up with 90 of us in the gallery. In fact, so many people turned up, they had to open 2 courts in the appeals court in the Royal Courts of Justice. And the judge said, this must be seen to be, justice must be seen to be done. And they opened up the other courts, 2 lots sat there. The other side, again, was putting all of these arguments, and then I stood up and gave a 20-minute speech on the Constitution and various other parts, just to let everyone know, I won 3-0. 3 appellate court judges, the second highest judges in this country, all agreed with my legal arguments. The King's Counsels, they said they was wrong. The barristers, they said they was wrong. The solicitors, they said they was wrong, and he said, Mr. Moore, you are correct in law. Right? So what I'm trying to say to people, to get 3-0 in the appellate court is very similar to getting an injunction against the British government in the European Court of Human Rights. Right? Remember, I'm not into any of this BS about skin colour or any of that stuff, right? I'm for disabled people, and I'm for us as normal, everyday working people being treated equally in law. That's as simple as that, right? So again, we run them arguments. The levy of money income tax VAT in European tax is illegal. They're not allowed to create taxes against you and just charge you. VAT technically, with the European Union, is an unlawful tax now because we're taxed by representation and they set the limits of taxation. That means you can't control it, only they do. Therefore, it's an illegal tax. It always has been, by the way. Well, the tax, well, that goes back to the Petition of Right, and taxation without representation is unlawful. It actually says that. So you must be represented. The levy of money income tax. Commissioners for ecological causes, you won't like this. Commissioners for ecological causes and all other commissions and courts of like nature like Sharia and Jewish law are illegal and pernicious. Pernicious means harmful. Right? Here's a good bit. Ecological, just in case, by the way, I'll never pronounce it properly, so ecological basically means Christian law. Right? Why did they bring that in? Because Mr. Vicar or Mr. Priest decided if you didn't give enough money when you went to church in the tray, he could lock you up in the vestry. Right? All sorts of strange stuff was going on. And what they were trying to say was, we can do what we like because we're the law. A lot of our laws were completely created by priesthoods and vicars and bishops and all sorts of stuff, right? So they had to during the Glorious Revolution, they actually put a finish to it all. But here's the kicker. It is constitutionally unlawful to have Sharia. And by the way, I've heard Lady Howe, because we was at a conference, because we're members of Selden Society, where King Charles III is the patron, and the Lady Chief Justice is the active, not a president, but one below, vice president, right? But the most important thing is, Lady Howe, a lady in the audience who was a barrister, also a Muslim, right, said to Lady Howe, when are we going to implement Sharia fully in England? And Lady Howe said, never. Right? And everyone, like not everyone, but people were having a moan about it. She said it's illegal under the English Bill of Rights. You cannot have Sharia in England. That's why all these councils are illegal. But just to make sure you know I'm not picking on anyone, right? You're not allowed to have Jewish law either. You're not allowed to have Hindu law. You can't have Sikh law. And here's the kicker, you can't have Christian law that is a punishment from your local council parish. Do you understand that? So it applies to everyone equally. So it's not us digging anyone out. We're saying we've already been through all this. Right? Go back to the Constitution and you'll understand that the Constitution is the solution. Our ancestors have seen all this before. And they found a solution. And by the way, they were so much cleverer than us. Right? They didn't walk around staring at mobile phones everywhere. Right? They had to get on to, with real life issues. Right? And only good people in business made it. There was no protections for people, you know, for whatever reason there was. So, the grants of promises and fines and forfeitures of Parliament person before conviction are illegal and void for non-excessive fines imposed nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. In 1641, we banned torture. There's another one called the European, not the European, sorry, Criminal Justice Act, 1988, Section 134, torture. and no one in the state is allowed to physically abuse you. And if they do, it carries a life sentence, right? And it comes from the United Nations Convention Against Torture. We've actually used that in one of our cases. One of our cases gets to the High Court December 2026. He actually got found not guilty for abusing a police officer, which was a load of nonsense. And the judge actually acknowledged and told the jury, if you believe he has been tortured, you must find him not guilty. And that's on record. Right? So imagine a judge in this country watching the video evidence of him being abused by 6 or 7 officers and then put it to the jury. By the way, the reason they put it to the jury is because I wrote him out a case statement of exactly what he should say to the judge, and he represented himself. He got rid of his barrister and his solicitor, and the only defence he had was the defence that I'd written for him. And he got found unanimously not guilty. Right? He rang me up just after, crying his eyes out. Commission for Lateral Grants. This goes back to some other elements. You know, like literally, I think I've said to you, speaking points. There was actually a debate in Parliament where they mentioned bill of rights, speaking cameras, and the other things are actually illegal. Right? That debate happened in a committee in Parliament. And it's because you don't know that this exists, it continues. When you start to know what your rights are, you start reading these books and saying, they're not allowed to do that, right? Once you start claiming your rights, that's what you've got to do, is claim the right. You have to go to court and get a judge to enforce it. And that the redress of all grievances for amending, strengthening and preserving the laws, Parliament ought to be held frequently. The Glorious Revolution actually argued it was every year it had to be held. Then it went to every 3 years. Does everyone know what the 5-year Parliament coincides with? Communist Manifesto. It's a 5-year plan. Right? That's true, by the way. You can look all this up. Karl Marx and Engels, I think it was, who co-wrote the Communist Manifesto, said, and I quote, every communist revolution has been shipwrecked on the rock of England. He didn't say Britain, he said England, right? Because Scotland is Roman law, England is common law. They need to destroy it, and we are the beating heart of the United States of America. And for redress of all grievances, what's that one there? Oh! So again, I said to you earlier that this has a supremacy clause, that no foreign prince, person, prelate, state or pontificate have or ought to have any jurisdiction, power, superiority, preeminence or authority, classical or spiritual within this realm, so help me God. You know what so help me God means? It's a solemn promise. You cannot break it. That's what causes perjury. That's why they hang you. Right? You go against God's promise, they will hang you. And that's why we need to take this nation back as a Christian nation. Right? That we take it back and say, if you go against our rights, that's what's going to happen. So, again, at the bottom here, you will see above are the common law constitutional rights removed by the British. The British flag is not your flag. If you want English, your flag is that one. Your country is England. Britain, in law, and I can show you in the law books, Britain is not a country. It was never intended to be a country. It is what's known in law as a unitary state. It is a state with authority, and it is centralised, but it is not a country. So when you hear people talk about Britain and the UK being a country, that is part of the psyop and the lie 1981, it was third because they erased all of our identities completely. If you slap that British tag on your forehead, you've got no English rights anymore because you are British. If you are British, you haven't got Scottish rights, you haven't got English rights, you haven't got Welsh rights, and you ain't got Irish rights. And Ireland slaughtered themselves in 1937 because prior to that they was reliant on the Magna Carta and even the Bill of Rights. Apart from they made some adjustment, they removed the reference to the Pope, right? I've personally got issues with, I don't like anyone having control over us. So, again, you've got all of these things in there: freedom of election, freedom of speech, that freedom of speech in debates or proceedings in Parliament ought not to be impeached or questions in any court or place. This is crucial, outside of Parliament. Do you know what that means? Anyone know what a whip is? Parliamentary whip. Do you know that they've got first line whip, second line whip, third line whip? Third line whip means you're expelled from the party if you don't toe the party line. Why did they do it as a 1 line, 2 line and 3 line? It's a code to tell the people off so they can communicate with the members of Parliament that are supposed to be supporting you as constituents, right? So a 1, 2, 3 line whip is a code, and a whip in Parliament is unconstitutional, but no one's ever challenged them. But it goes against the English Bill of Rights. Because their conscience is for you, and a member of Parliament should always be representing you as constituents, not their party, and not the policies of that party. So if you stand up and you rule against a particular policy, they should be saying that in court. The person who's coming close is Rupert Rowe. And guess what? A week after he mentioned the English Bill of Rights in Parliament, the form kicks him out. Why? Because they want to bring in a British Bill of Rights. We don't need a British Bill of Rights. The Scots don't need a British Bill of Rights. The Scots have got the claim right on this, 1689. So again, that's the basis of what goes on. But one thing I will say to everyone, and then we'll go into the questions and answers, and I'm going to sit down and hopefully hear people. Don't forget I'm deaf. Right? All of these rights depend on you understanding them and passing them on. Our ancestors fought and died for them rights and pass on to you. Right? We do not want to be the generation that fails our ancestors or our future generations. You have to pass the eternal flame of freedom to the next generations. The only way you can do that is to understand this, to claim your rights, and keep fighting against the totalitarian state and the authoritative state. Right? You are neither fascist or communist. You are English, and you should stand up and save the rights of your future generations. Because if you don't, they will never understand the freedoms that you had. Because that's what the Soviets did. By the way, the Soviet Union, just to make sure you're aware of this, they brainwashed the people to believe that they were Soviet. And the Soviet Union was folded in 1991. If you go and speak to some of the older population in Russia, Poland, even in Poland, believe it or not, they'll still tell you they're a Soviet. They brainwashed the people. They indoctrinated them in schools to believe they were something they were not. Right? And that's what they've done in this country. Right? They don't teach us about this history. They certainly didn't teach certain generations in this country our history, our real history. This has only been a brief on it. But the main point you really want to go over is, and I'm just going to make sure everyone is aware of this, that in 2011, that there was a census, for the first time ever. They put in that census English only nationwide generally. 67%. 32.4 million people, mark that census English only. British come back as 19%, a minority. Right? So they knew who he was. They divided the area up, and a number of groups and corporations took 4 billion off the government and flooded the areas, the northeast in particular, with migrants, because they give them British passports and it diluted the Englishness of the area. Right? So they took 4 billion of your money and pumped them areas with other people. Right? So again, don't think I'm anti anyone. I'm not. My job is to safeguard England and our culture. Right? And I don't care what colour you are, but you must be English. Right? So one of my pals from South London, his mum and dad is Jamaican. He's got dreads down to his arse, he talks like me, he walks like me, and when I say to him, what nationality are you? He says, I'm English. Right? He hates the British with a vengeance. Right? But his brother is the complete opposite. Right? So even in the same family, they can be against each other. But he is really, he's just like us. He just wants to be left alone. Right? And that's the way we've always been. So with that, I'll say that's the end of the actual seminar. Anyone got any questions? Go on, there's a few coming. So I think, right, hang on a minute. All right, let me go for the questions first. Go on, Adrian.
You said that
Hang on, let me see if this works.
Right, folks, as you heard Graham say, that's the end of the seminar, and he's going into the questions and answers. I'm going to cut the live feed now. There will be footage that will be made available to me, which I will upload as separate videos on the channel, so you can see the Q&A as well. So I'm going to end it there. Thank you everybody for watching. Please make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, share this everywhere, and I'll talk to you soon.
between common law jurisdictions